Picture the most expensive wedding America has ever seen. Now fill the church with 4,000 flowers, 60 hand-picked voices in the choir loft, and a bishop brought in specially to bless it. Add a crowd outside so thick that 300 policemen have to hold it back. Add a bridegroom checking his watch at the altar. And add a bride, 18 years old, standing behind a locked door 8 blocks away, crying so hard that her maid is dabbing her face with a sponge soaked in cold water, trying to shrink the swelling around her eyes before the veil goes on. That's New York. November the 6th, 1895. The richest girl in the country is being married this morning, and she's been weeping since dawn. And there is a footman posted outside her bedroom door to make sure she does not run. We're going back there tonight, not as guests in the pews, craning our necks with the rest of Fifth Avenue. We're going inside the white satin, inside the whalebone, inside the girl. One wedding, one marriage, one life that half the world envied and nobody would have traded for. So, I make these history stories, and honestly, I have no clue if anyone actually sleeps to them or if you're all just weirdos who like hearing about crying heiresses and dukes who married for plumbing money. Either way, subscribe if you want. Get comfortable. Here we go. Your name is Consuelo Vanderbilt. You are 18 years old, and the first thing you understand about this morning before you are even fully awake is that your face has betrayed you. You feel it before you see it. The tightness around your eyes. The hot, sandpapered feeling of the lids. You cried last night until the candle burned down, and you cried again when the room went grey with the first light off the Hudson. And now the evidence is printed on your skin where 4,000 people will be able to read it. There is a mirror across the room. You do not look at it yet. The house around you is not quiet. That is the strange thing about this morning. A house on the day of a funeral goes silent. A house on the day of a wedding roars. You can hear it through the floor, doors opening and closing 2 stories down, the fast hard heels of servants on marble, a man's voice giving orders in the hall, the rattle of something being carried, dropped, caught. Somewhere below you, florists are still working. They have been working since 4. The smell of their work has climbed the stairs and slid under your door, and it reaches you now where you lie. Lilies and roses, and the green, wet, cut stem smell of a whole garden that has been beheaded for you. You will hate the smell of lilies for the rest of your life. You don't know that yet, but you will. You sit up. The sheets are linen, ironed to a coolness like the inside of a shell, and they resist you slightly as you move, the way good heavy linen does. Your feet find the carpet. The carpet is deep enough to swallow your toes. Everything in this house is the best that money can buy, and you have never once been asked what you wanted any of it to be. There is a knock at the door. Not a servant's knock. Servants scratch, softly, with one knuckle. This is 2 firm raps, and then the door opens without waiting for your answer, because the person opening it has never in your life waited for your answer. Your mother. Alva Vanderbilt is not a tall woman. She barely comes up to your shoulder now. You grew past her at 14 and she never forgave your spine for it. But when she enters a room, the room rearranges itself around her, the way iron filings rearrange themselves around a magnet, and you feel the pull in your own body. Your shoulders going back, your chin lifting before you've decided to move anything at all. That is her work. She built that reflex into you the way engineers build a curve into a rail. It took years. She looks at your face and her mouth goes thin. You've been crying. It is not a question, so you do not answer it. You learned very young that answering her statements is a kind of contradiction, and contradiction has a price. She crosses to the window and twitches the curtain aside 1 inch. Below, on the street, there is already a sound like the sea. You've been hearing it without hearing it. A low, breathing rumble. Thousands of feet and voices, held back by police barricades along the whole route from this house to the church. They've come to see you. Some of them have been standing since before dawn in the November cold, stamping their boots on the pavement, blowing into their hands, waiting for a look at the girl who is about to become a duchess. They are saying it is the wedding of the century, your mother says to the glass. They are correct. She turns. Her eyes go over you the way a jeweller's eyes go over a stone. Not unkindly exactly, but entirely without sentiment, checking for flaws that will show under the loupe. Cold water. Ice if the water isn't enough. I will send Jean up. You will not appear at that altar looking like a scullery maid who's been dismissed without a character. A pause. Eat nothing. You'll faint in the corset if you eat, and you'll be sick if you eat, and either way the bodice was fitted to you fasting. And then she is gone, and the door clicks, and a moment later you hear it. The small, deliberate scuff of a man's shoe settling onto the floorboards outside your room. The footman, taking up his post. Your mother has set a guard on your door, on your wedding morning, in case you run. And here is the thing you need to understand, the thing that makes this morning what it is. She is not wrong too. Because if that door were unguarded, and if there were anywhere on this earth to run to, you would already be gone. Let me take you back. Because you did not arrive at this locked door in one morning. You were walked here step by step over 18 years, and every step was planned by the small woman who just left the room, and to understand the crying you have to understand the walking. Start with your spine. You are 7, maybe 8 years old, and you are doing your lessons at a table in the schoolroom, and you cannot lean forward over your book because you're wearing the rod. It is a steel rod. It runs up your back along your spine. At the bottom, it fastens to a belt at your waist. At the top, it fastens to a second strap that goes around your forehead, across the bare skin above your eyebrows, and the strap is pulled snug, so that your head is held up and back, whether your neck is tired or not. Your neck is always tired. To read your book, you have to hold the book up, because your head cannot come down to it. Your arms ache by the end of an hour. There is a red line across your forehead when the strap comes off, and in summer, when you sweat, the leather chafes the line raw. Other girls do not wear this. You know that. You have seen your cousins bend over their needlework like willows, and nobody strapped their skulls to a pole. But your mother has decided that your carriage will be perfect, that you will move through rooms like a queen moves, and so the rod goes on for lessons every day for years, and your body learns what it is being taught, that it does not belong to you, that it is a project, that someone else holds the specifications. 50 years from now, people who meet you as an old woman will still remark on it. That extraordinary posture, they'll say. That neck, like a swan. They will mean it as a compliment. You will thank them, and you will feel the ghost of a leather strap across your forehead every single time. That was the rod. Now the whip. There was a riding whip in the house, and it was not only for horses. When you were disobedient, when you were impossible, when you argued, your mother used it. She said so herself later, in a courtroom, under oath, without shame, because she believed to the end of her days that she had done it all for you. Discipline, formation, the breaking in that any valuable creature requires before it can be shown. You learned not to argue, or rather, you learned to move the arguing inward, down into a small sealed room in your chest where she could not reach it, and to give the outside of you over to obedience the way you give a coat to a footman at a door. The outside curtsied. The outside said, "Yes, Mamma." The inside kept its own counsel and waited, and did not know what it was waiting for. You were not raised, you see. You were manufactured to tolerances for a purpose, and you found out what the purpose was the year you turned 17. But before the purpose, you should see the machine that built you, because your childhood had an address, and the address was itself a weapon. Number 665th Avenue. New Yorkers called it the Petit Chateau, and they were not being entirely kind when they said it. Your mother built it when you were 5 years old. $3 million of grey Indiana limestone raised in the middle of a city of brownstone. A French chateau of the Loire Valley dropped onto a Manhattan corner like a glove thrown down, because that is exactly what it was. A glove thrown down. The old families of New York, the Astors and their circle, had decided that the Vanderbilts were the new money, railroad money, money with coal dust still on it, and that no Vanderbilt would be received in the drawing rooms that mattered. Your mother heard that verdict and answered it with architecture. She hired Richard Morris Hunt, the finest architect in America, and she built a house so beautiful, so aggressively, unanswerably beautiful, that the city's refusal to enter it became more embarrassing to the refusers than to her. Then she threw a costume ball in March of 1883, 1,200 guests, and she arranged matters so that Mrs. Astor's own daughter was desperate to attend, and Mrs. Astor herself had to climb down off 16 years of contempt and leave her card at the door of the coal dust Vanderbilts. Your mother won. Your mother always won. You were 6 years old, asleep upstairs while 1,000 people in fancy dress danced below you, and the lessons soaked into you with the music through the floorboards. Society is a war, houses are artillery, and daughters, you would learn this part later, daughters are ammunition. And then there was the other house, the summer house, Marble House, in Newport, Rhode Island, finished the year you were 15. $11 million, and $7 million of that was the marble alone. 500,000 cubic feet of it. White Westchester marble outside, yellow sienna marble glowing like butter in the entrance hall, pink Numidian marble in the dining room, a ballroom sheeted in gold. Your father gave it to your mother as a birthday present. She called it her little cottage by the sea, which was the Newport joke. Everyone called their palaces cottages, and the cold in that joke was the cold of the marble itself. Because here is what nobody tells you about a marble house. It is never warm. Marble drinks heat. You press your palm flat against a wall of it on an August afternoon, and the stone pulls the warmth out of your hand like water pulling warmth out of a swimmer, and your palm comes away chilled, and the wool has not changed at all. You lived summers inside a beautiful refrigerator, and your footsteps rang on the floors no matter how softly you tried to walk, so that you could never move through your own home unheard. Your mother could track you by sound. You sometimes thought the house had been designed for that. Your bedroom there had no lock you controlled. Your mail was read. Your books were chosen. Until you were out in society, you never once went anywhere alone. Not to a shop, not to a friend's house, not down the lawn to the sea. A governess, a maid, a mother. Always a keeper. Always eyes. You had a fortune that newspapers estimated in the tens of millions. and you could not have told a stranger what money felt like in your own hand because you never carried any. You did not buy so much as a ribbon for yourself. Things appeared. Things were fitted to you. You were dressed the way a lamppost is painted, and you might have gone on believing this was simply what life was if it hadn't been for the library. Your father's library and your governess's and the books. That was the one gate they left open, because it never occurred to your mother that a gate made of paper could lead anywhere. You read in English and French and German. You read history, you read novels, you sat with a little notebook and copied out sentences that struck you. And inside the sealed room in your chest, the one the whip had built, a second person quietly assembled herself out of all those sentences. A person with opinions. A person who noticed things. A person who watched her own gilded life from a slight distance, the way you watch weather through a window, and took notes. That person is the one telling you, this November morning, with a footman outside the door, this is wrong. What is being done to you today is wrong, and everyone downstairs knows it is wrong, and it is going to happen anyway. Hold that thought. We're going back 2 more years, because you need to meet 2 men, the one you wanted, and the one you're getting, the one you wanted first. His name is Winthrop Rutherford. Everyone calls him Winty. He's 12 years older than you, which at 17 feels less like a gap than a promotion, and he is, by the general agreement of every woman in New York, the handsomest bachelor in America. Tall, dark, old family, genuinely old, descended from Peter Stuyvesant himself, the kind of ancestry your mother spent millions trying to purchase the neighbourhood of. He is not rich, not by your family's insane standard, but he is comfortable, he is charming, and when he talks to you, he does something no one else does. He listens until you finish. You have to understand how rare that is in your life. Your mother interrupts you. Your governesses correct you. Society men talk at you, performing for the fortune while looking slightly past the girl. Winthrop Rutherford asks you a question, and then closes his mouth and waits, with his whole face, as if the next thing you say might actually matter. You're 17. It goes through you like brandy. The courtship happens the only way courtship can happen for a girl who is never alone, in fragments, in public, in stolen margins. A dance where his gloved hand at your waist is exactly correct and still somehow says more than it should. A dinner where he manoeuvres to sit near you and you spend 2 hours discussing books while your mother's eyes drill into the side of your head from down the table. And then, in the spring of 1895, the bicycles. Bicycling is the craze that year. Everyone rides. And a bicycle, you discover, is a miracle of a very specific kind. It is the first machine you've ever operated that carries you faster than a chaperone can follow. There is a morning on a country road, the whole party strung out along it, and Winty puts on speed, and you put on speed and the others fall back, and for the length of perhaps half a mile you are, for the first time in your remembered life, effectively alone with a man. The air is cold and green, your heart is slamming, and only partly from the pedalling. The wheels hiss on the packed dirt, and into that half-mile pedalling beside you slightly breathless, Winthrop Rutherford asks you to marry him. You say yes. You say it fast before the sound of pursuing tyres can catch up, and then the others are back around you and the 2 of you ride on with faces arranged into nothing at all, engaged secretly, both of you knowing exactly what stands between this half-mile of dirt road and a wedding. What stands between is 4 feet 11 inches tall and is at this moment planning your future in a house on Fifth Avenue. Because your mother has other arrangements in mind. Your mother has had other arrangements in mind. You will eventually understand, since before you could read. And in the summer of 1895, with her own divorce from your father just finalized, a scandal, she survived the way she survived everything, by outfacing it. Alva takes you to Europe and then brings you home to Newport to the marble refrigerator and closes the door. And now you meet the second man, the one you're getting. His name, his full official weapons-grade name, is Charles Richard John Spencer Churchill, 9th Duke of Marlborough. The family calls him Sonny, which is short for Sunderland, one of his lesser titles, and not, as you will discover, a description of his temperament. He is 23 years old. He is slight, shorter than you are, with a pale, careful, disappointed face, the face of a man who inherited the grandest palace in England and none of the money required to keep its roof from letting in the rain. 'Cause that is the whole of it, really. That is the entire transaction, and nobody involved is confused about it, and the only person who will be asked to pretend otherwise, at an altar, before God, is you. The Duke of Marlborough owns Blenheim Palace. Blenheim is not a house. Blenheim is a national monument with bedrooms, a building the size of a small town given by Queen Anne and a grateful nation to the first Duke after he smashed the French at the Battle of Blenheim in 1704. 7 acres of roof, 187 rooms, a park of 2,700 acres with a lake in it, and a bridge over the lake grand enough to carry a Roman emperor. And all of it, by the 1890s, is quietly rotting, because the agricultural money that built the English aristocracy has collapsed, and the 8th Duke already sold the Marlborough gems and the great library, and even the old masters off the walls, and still the roof leaks, and still the drains fail, and the 9th Duke has inherited a sacred obligation the size of a mountain, and an income the size of a hill. There is a solution to his problem, and everyone in his world knows what it is, because it has become almost an industry. American girls, railroad girls, steel girls, dry goods girls, girls whose fathers own things that actually produce money, shipped across the Atlantic and exchanged dollar for dignity in the marriage market of London. By the time this era is done, hundreds of American heiresses will have bought their way into the British peerage, or been sold into it, depending on which end of the bargain you're standing at. The newspapers have a phrase for them. Dollar princesses. You're about to become the most famous dollar princess who ever lived. Your mother met the Duke through the Paris season, through mutual friends, through the great humming switchboard of transatlantic ambition, and she looked at him and saw the one thing her millions had never yet purchased. Rank. Real rank. Not New York rank, which she had already conquered and found small. A duchess outranks nearly every woman in the British Empire. A duchess is announced first, seated first, curtsied to. Alva Vanderbilt, the coal-dust bride, the divorcee, would be the mother of a duchess, and there is no drawing room on earth that could be closed to her after that. The Duke, for his part, looked at you and saw a roof. Understand, he was not a monster. That is almost the sad part. He was courteous, correct, dutiful. He simply regarded Blenheim the way a priest regards his church, as a trust that outweighed any living person's happiness, very much including his own. He needed money the way a drowning man needs air, and here was money, 17 years old, with a swan's neck and famous dark eyes, and he did what his class had trained him to do just as thoroughly as the steel rod had trained you. He proposed the merger, but first your mother had to deliver the asset, and the asset had promised herself to a handsome nobody on a bicycle. So now comes the part of the story that sounds invented. I want to be clear with you. It is not invented. Your mother confirmed nearly all of it herself years later under oath, because by then she needed the truth on record for her own reasons. This happened. When Alva learns about Winthrop Rutherford, and she learns, because you have no secrets, because your letters are read, she does not argue with you. Arguing would imply your opinion had standing. Instead, she declares total war, and the war has phases. Phase 1, separation. You are removed from him as cleanly as a splinter. The Europe trip. Then Newport, Marble House, and the doors close. Your letters to him are intercepted. His letters to you simply never arrive. You will not know for years whether he wrote, what he wrote, whether he stood somewhere waiting for an answer that a servant had already carried to your mother's desk. When he calls at the house, he's turned away at the door. Once, you're told, he tries to see you during a public event, and it is managed smoothly, invisibly, the way rich houses manage things, so that he never gets within speaking distance. You're 17 years old, and you're being kept from a man the way a bank keeps bullion from the street, and the entire staff is in on it, and everyone is very polite. Phase 2, attrition. Your mother tells you things about Winthrop Rutherford, that he is a fortune hunter, that there are other women, that there are things about him, unspecified things, unfit for your ears, which she knows, and you do not. You do not believe her, but you cannot check. That is the perfection of your cage. You have no independent line to the world, no friend she cannot reach first, no way to test any statement she makes. Doubt gets in anyway. Doubt is a damp. It does not need a door. Phase 3, the siege gun. One evening at Marble House, you find your courage where you can, and you tell her flatly that you will not marry the Duke, that you will marry the man you have chosen or no one. You have defied her perhaps twice in your life. You brace for the storm, the raised voice, the whip voice she kept long after the whip. What you get is worse. She goes calm. She informs you, in the tone of a woman describing settled weather, that she will shoot Winthrop Rutherford dead rather than see you married to him, and that no jury in America would convict her because she would have been protecting her child. You stand on the marble in the Marble House, and you look into her face for the exaggeration, for the rhetoric, and you cannot find it. Later that night, or in the days after, this sequence blurs the way sequences do around a wound. The household is suddenly, hushingly, informed that your mother's health is broken. Her heart. The doctor is sent for. The doctor, who is her doctor, emerges grave. Your defiance, you're given to understand, is killing her. Any further resistance and her death will be quite precisely on your hands. You are 17. You've been engineered since birth to obey this exact woman. You sit up through a long night with a friend of your mother's stationed beside you. Even now, especially now, you are not left alone. And the friend explains to you, gently, mercilessly, hour after hour, that you must give in, that your mother will never yield and may actually die, that the Duke is a fine man, that girls do not understand their own hearts at your age. Somewhere in that night, the sealed room in your chest goes quiet, not empty, quiet. The watcher inside you sits down, folds her hands, and begins doing the only thing left to do, which is to observe and remember and wait. In the morning you agree to marry the Duke of Marlborough. Your mother's heart recovers with remarkable speed. Within days she is upright, brisk, luminous with victory, planning the wedding of the century. If you were older, you might find that recovery clarifying. You are not older. In the morning you agree to marry the Duke of Marlborough, except that even that is not quite how it is staged, because your mother is an artist, and artists do not skip the set pieces. The agreement must be performed. The Duke must come and see and propose and be accepted in a manner fit for the newspapers of 2 continents, and so the last summer of your girlhood becomes a production, and Marble House is the stage. He arrives in Newport in the last week of August, 1895, and the resort loses its mind. Understand what Newport is that summer. A few square miles of Rhode Island coastline holding the densest concentration of American money on earth. 70-room cottages shoulder to shoulder along Bellevue Avenue and the cliffs, and a social season run with the discipline of a military campaign. Calls and drives and bathing hours and dinners, all of it commanded by a handful of women of whom your mother, even divorced, even scandalous, remains one of the most feared. Into this arena comes an actual duke, a real one, young and single, and every mother on the avenue understands instantly what is happening and whose flag is planted on it, and the watching begins. You cannot take a carriage down Bellevue without faces turning. The Duke is lodged, squired, displayed. You are displayed beside him. The 2 of you are driven out together along the ocean drive, the Atlantic smashing white on the rocks below, wind pulling at your hat veil, and you make conversation. He is easiest to talk to about architecture, you discover, buildings being the one subject that genuinely animates him. And behind you and before you, in other carriages at other windows, all of Newport watches the merchandise being shown. Then the ball. Your mother gives it on the 28th of August at Marble House, in the Duke's honour, and it is generally agreed afterward to have been the event of the season, possibly of any season. The gold ballroom blazing, favours from Paris, hundreds of guests, the marble corridors banked with hothouse flowers whose scent lies on the chilled stone air in layers, and you in white at the centre of it, dancing, being watched, dancing. Your feet do the figures. Your face does the face. You've been trained for exactly this since the schoolroom, and the training holds, and no one in that golden room, except perhaps one small satisfied woman in the place of honour, can see that the guest of honours intended is performing under siege, that her letters are still intercepted, that her door at night is still effectively watched, and then, near the end of his stay, the scene itself. The Gothic room. Your mother has a room at Marble House built and furnished in the medieval style, stone traceried dim, crowded with the carved saints and altarpieces she collects, a room of old dark holy things bought new, and it is there, among the 15th century's furniture, that the 9th Duke of Marlborough proposes marriage to you. She chose the room. Of course she chose the room. Say this for Alva. Her stagecraft never faltered. If your daughter must be sacrificed, do it before an audience of saints. What does he say? Nothing you will trouble to preserve. It is correct. It is brief. There is no pretence of passion on either side, which is, you will come to think, the single honest thing in the whole summer. He asks, the machinery has already answered. You say what the machinery requires. Somewhere in the house, within minutes, your mother knows. The cable to the newspapers goes out almost at once. The announcement will be public before your own relations have been told. And that is how you learn, finally and completely, whose event this is. A girl might want an hour to sit with the closing of her own life. An impresario cables the press. The engagement is announced in September 1895 and the country goes insane. You've never seen anything like the weeks that follow, and neither has America. The newspapers print your measurements. I want you to sit with that. Not your opinions, which no one has asked for. Your measurements, your waist, your height, the size of your throat printed in the public press and discussed over 1,000,000 breakfasts because a dressmaker talked or a maid was paid, and you are now a national commodity, and commodities get specifications published. Reporters camp outside the Fifth Avenue house. Shopgirls buy penny portraits of you. Preachers sermonize about the marriage, some blessing it, some thundering that American womanhood is being auctioned to decadent Europe, and the thundering ones are closer to the truth, and everybody quietly knows it, and it changes nothing, because the spectacle has its own momentum now, a locomotive with no brake, and you strap to the front of it like a figurehead. The trousseau alone becomes national news. It is being made in Paris, and its contents leak garment by garment into the press until American women can recite it. The gowns, the furs, the linens by the dozen, and, this caused an actual sensation, the lingerie, described in print down to the rose point lace and the gold clasps, under things reported on like treaty terms, so that strangers on streetcars are discussing what the Vanderbilt girl will wear against her skin on her wedding night. Try to imagine your privacy dying that way, piece by piece, in column inches. There is no part of you left unsold to the public appetite. Your face is on cards, your fortune is in headlines, your measurements are in the papers, and now even the last layer, the layer against the body itself, has been inventoried for the crowd. You read some of it. You cannot help it. The papers lie about the house like weather. You learn the modern skill a century early. Seeing yourself described by strangers, half wrong, wholly confident, and swallowing it, and saying nothing. And in those same weeks you perform the fittings, hour upon hour of them, standing on a dais in a workroom or a bedroom with your arms held slightly out while kneeling. Women travel around you with pins in their mouths, the tissue paper hiss of silk being lifted and settled, the tug at a seam, the cold prickle when a pin finds skin, and the muffled apology through pins, the smell of new cloth and chalk and other people's concentration. Turn, please, mademoiselle. You turn. Raise the arm, you raise it. Your body has been public property all your life, but never so literally as now. Handled, measured, corrected, discussed in the third person while present. The waist wants half an inch, the shoulder falls better so, as though the dress were the client and you the mannequin it had been fitted with, which, in every sense that will matter in the vestry, is the truth. And while the country reads about your waist, the lawyers are in a room reading about everything else. Because there is a contract. There is an actual, physical, legal marriage settlement, negotiated between the Duke's solicitors and your father's men of business, hammered out clause by clause while you are being fitted for the trousseau, and here is the part they will not put in the sermons. The final terms are signed in the vestry. On the wedding day itself. The ink of the business deal and the ink of the register, the same morning, a few feet of consecrated air apart. The price of a duchess, as it turns out, is this: $2.5 million in shares of the Beech Creek Railway Company transferred to the Duke of Marlborough, with a guaranteed 4%. The trains of your grandfather's empire pulling money across Pennsylvania forever into the coffers of Blenheim, plus a further $100,000 a year for life to each of you separately. In the money of that world it is a stupefying sum, enough to re-roof a palace, enough to re-lead the windows and relay the drains and regild the staterooms and dam the lake. In today's money you are speaking of something on the order of $100 million, Minimum paid by an American father so that an English building may live. Your father signs it, and your father is the ache inside the ache, because Willie K. Vanderbilt is not a cruel man. He is a kind, weak, defeated man, fresh from the divorce, out-generaled by Alva for 20 years like everyone else, and he loves you in his mild way, and he pays. On the morning of the wedding, it will be his arm you hold walking up the aisle, and his arm, you will notice, is trembling worse than yours. But that is still weeks away. First, you must be built. The dress is cream-white satin, and the satin has weight, real weight. It moves against your legs like poured cream gone solid, with a train 5 yards long worked in seed pearls and silver, so heavy that when it is laid out across the room it looks less like clothing than like a landscape, a frozen river you are expected to drag. The flounces at the hem are old lace. The veil is tulle, and it will be pinned into your dark hair with orange blossoms, and underneath all of it, closest to your skin, is the machine, the corset. I need you to feel this because you cannot understand this bride or this era or this story without spending a minute inside her ribcage. A corset of 1895 is not shapewear. It is architecture. Whalebone, baleen, the springy black plates from the mouths of whales, or steel channeled into drill and coutil, a fabric woven so tight it barely stretches at all, with a rigid busk of steel running down your front from breastbone to belly like a splint. It does not go on. It is installed. You hold the bedpost. Your maid sets her knee, actually sets her knee, into the small of your back, and hauls the laces, and hauls again, and each haul empties you a little, the breath going out in a sound you cannot help, and the bones settle into the flesh over your ribs and find the grooves they have been carving there since you were 14. Laced for a state occasion, your waist is under 20 inches. Your lungs learn to breathe in the top third of your chest, quick and shallow like a bird. You cannot bend at the waist. You fold from the hips, when you fold at all. You cannot eat more than a few mouthfuls. There's nowhere for food to go. Sitting is a skill. Fainting is an industry. There are couches designed for it, salts carried for it, an entire etiquette of catching. And the marks. When the corset comes off at night, there are red channels pressed into your skin, ladder rungs up your sides, and the flesh aches as blood comes back into it. And this is simply the cost of being a lady, unremarked, universal, borne by every woman in every portrait you have ever admired. On your wedding morning, your body will be laced into that machine, and the machine laced into the satin, and the satin buried under the veil, and somewhere at the bottom of all those engineered layers there will be a girl, breathing in the top third of her chest, trying not to cry again. Which brings us back. Back to the morning, back to the locked room and the footman's shoe outside the door. November the 6th, 1895. And the water in the basin has been changed 3 times because your tears keep warming it. Jean, your maid, works on your face in silence. She is French, small, deft, and she's the closest thing to an ally you have in this house, which is to say she's sorry for you and can do absolutely nothing. Her fingertips are cool from the water. She presses the sponge to one eye, holds it, lifts it, presses it to the other, and the cold sinks in and dulls the burning for a moment, and then the burning comes back. She has ice now, wrapped in a napkin, and the melt runs a thin cold line down your temple into your hairline, and she chases it with a towel before it can reach the lace collar of your dressing gown. Neither of you speaks. What is there to say? Downstairs, your mother is not even in the house anymore. She's gone ahead to the church, blazing in blue satin, to take up her position at the centre of her triumph. Your father will come for you at 11:15. The ceremony is set for noon. Outside, the sea sound of the crowd has thickened. When Jean crosses to the window for more light, you catch one slice of the street through the curtain gap. A solid mass of hats, dark and pale, packed from house front to house front, and the mounted police holding a channel open down the middle of Fifth Avenue like a parted sea. The papers will say the crowds were the largest New York had ever turned out for a private event. Women will faint in the crush outside the church and be passed out over heads, hand to hand like parcels. All of that. For a look at you. The hairdresser comes and goes, the orange blossoms are pinned, and then it is time for the machine, and you hold the bedpost, and Jean sets her knee, and the breath goes out of you hall by hall, and honestly, there is a mercy in it this morning because the corset is so total, so loud in the body, that for whole minutes it crowds out everything else. It is hard to despair properly when you cannot breathe below the fourth rib. The satin comes down over your head in a rustling white avalanche and is fastened, hook by hook by hook, 30 small cold metal resistances closing up your spine where the steel rod used to lie. The train is attached and spread. The veil descends over your face and the world goes soft-edged and slightly unreal behind the tulle, which you realise may be the entire point of veils. And then you're done. Built. You stand in the middle of the room, 5 yards of pearled river fanned out behind you, and Jean steps back and her eyes are wet, and she says very quietly, "Mademoiselle est belle." You look at the mirror at last. The girl in it is beautiful. The girl in it looks like she's going to a coronation or an execution, and behind the tulle you genuinely cannot tell which, and the swelling around her eyes, after all that ice, still shows. 20 minutes past 11, your father is announced, and downstairs at the door the roar of the crowd comes up the stairwell like heat from an opened oven. Your father is waiting in the hall, in the grey light, in his frock coat, holding his silk hat in both hands the way men hold hats at funerals. When he sees you coming down the stairs, something moves through his face that he does not manage to hide fast enough. He is a man watching a bill come due that he signed with his eyes open, and finding, at the last moment, that the currency is his daughter, and that he knew that all along, and that knowing it has not helped. "You look lovely, Consuelo," he says, and his voice is wrong, and you both hear it. He gives you his arm. Through the glove, through his sleeve, you can feel the fine tremor in it, a hum like a wire in wind. The front door opens and the sound hits you as a physical thing. You have heard crowds before. You have never been the reason for one. The roar that comes off Fifth Avenue when the white figure appears in the doorway is not quite human, and not quite anything else. It is thousands of voices firing at once at the sight of you, and it rolls up the steps and breaks over you, and under the veil you flinch, and your father's hand comes over yours on his arm and presses it flat, and that pressure, that one warm, private pressure inside the public storm, nearly undoes all of Jean's ice at a stroke. The carriage, the step, the satin managed in armfuls by hands you don't see, the door shutting the roar down to a rumble, and then the slow roll down the avenue with the parted sea on both sides, faces and faces and faces, every one of them turned to your window, hats coming off, handkerchiefs waving, a woman holding a baby up as you pass as though you could bless it, and behind the tulle you sit with your spine held the way the rod taught it, and your gloved hands folded the way the whip taught them, and you understand with a floating glassy clarity that not one person in this immense crowd, not one, has any idea that the bride is going to her wedding the way cargo goes to a ship. The papers tomorrow will call you radiant. Print survives. Truth doesn't, unless somebody writes it down. 58 years from now, an old woman in France will finally write it down, and her book will begin the correction. But that woman cannot help you this morning, because this morning she is you, and she is 19 minutes from the altar. St. Thomas Church, 5th Avenue at 53rd Street. Brownstone, high Gothic, and this morning it has been turned into a jungle. Florists have been at it for days. Garlands looped between the pillars, banks of palms, walls of chrysanthemums and roses, and lilies, of course lilies, thousands of them, their thick, sweet, funeral smell lying over the incense and stone smell of the church so heavily that guests in the back pews grow faint of it. 60 singers in the loft, a full orchestra, bishops, plural. Outside, the crushers become dangerous. Police lines bow and reform. It will take mounted officers to hold the steps. And inside at the altar rail stands a slim young man of 23, the 9th Duke of Marlborough, checking the time, because you are late. Noon comes and goes. The orchestra, which has played through its planned programme, begins again at the top. In the pews, 4,000 of the best-dressed people in America begin, very discreetly, to turn their heads. 1 minute late is nothing. 5 is fashion. At 10 minutes the whispering starts, silk rustling against silk down the long nave like wind moving through a field, and the whisper has one word in it, Rutherford. Is she coming at all? Has the girl bolted? Is it true what they say about the mother and the door? At 15 minutes even the Duke's practised calm has gone slightly rigid at the jaw. At 20 minutes the Church of St. Thomas holds 4,000 people and one single suspended question. They will never know the answer was ice water, that the delay was a girl's swollen eyes being sponged in a locked bedroom until they could pass under a veil. The most fashionable mystery of 1895, and the solution is a crying jag and a napkin full of melting ice. Then the doors, then the organ detonating into the wedding march, then 4,000 people rising in one long sighing rush of silk, and you are moving up the aisle on your father's trembling arm through a canyon of turned faces, and the smell of the lilies closes over your head like water. I will not make you live every minute at that rail. Some of it you will never afterwards be able to remember yourself. The mind kindly drops things, but 3 pieces of it stay, and they will stay for 60 years, so they stay here too. The first is the responses. Your voice, when it comes out low and does not shake, which surprises you, as though the watcher in the sealed room has taken over the speaking so the rest of you can be elsewhere. You hear yourself promise. The words are enormous, and they go by like stations passed by an express. Love, honour, till death. Lit windows flashing past something that does not stop. The second is his hand. When the Duke takes your hand to put on the ring, his fingers are perfectly steady and perfectly cool, a dry, formal, unfamiliar coolness, the handshake of a man closing on a property, and the ring goes over your glove-creased knuckle and seats itself, a small, cold, circular weight. And that weight is the whole marriage in miniature, and some animal part of you knows it instantly. The third is that behind your veil at your own wedding, in front of the massed aristocracy of 2 nations, you are crying again, quietly, expensively. The tool blurs it for the pews. The bishop is close enough to see and continues without a flicker. because bishops of fashionable parishes have seen everything. The tears run down and drop from your jaw into the lace at your throat where they are absorbed, like everything else about you, by the trousseau, the register, the vestry, and in the vestry, among the surplices, the last signatures on the settlement, the railway shares, the 100,000 a year, completing themselves in the margins of the sacrament, so that when you walk back down that aisle on the Duke's correct grey arm, to the trumpets, under the pealing, through the rice and the raw, the deal and the marriage are both simultaneously done. On the church steps the crowd surges so hard the police lines nearly fail. Women scream your name, your new name, your grace. It falls on you like confetti and like sleet, both at once, and the carriage swallows you, and the door shuts, and beside you on the seat is a stranger to whom you're now bound for life. And he settles his hat on his knees and looks out his window at the mob of your countrymen and says nothing at all. The wedding breakfast passes the way state occasions pass, in a bright, loud blur with you at the still centre of it. And then the going-away dress and the pier and the ship. You sail for your honeymoon, and your mother stands with a crowd of farewell and does not weep, because why would she? Generals do not weep at victories. The last you see of New York is the harbour sliding backward, the city stacking itself up grey and gold in the November light, getting smaller, and your father on the pier getting smaller, and the gap of dirty green water between you and everything you have ever known getting wider at exactly the speed of the engines, which do not care. You're 18. You're a duchess. You're the most envied woman in the Western world. You go below to the bridal suite, and it has been filled by well-wishers with flowers, lilies. Now, the honeymoon. The part of the story that gives this episode its name. And I want to be careful here and honest with you, the way I try always to be honest. What happened in the privacy of that marriage's first weeks, we know because Consuelo herself told it, decades later, in her memoirs, in her own dry, wounded, beautifully controlled voice. So when I tell you she cried through her own honeymoon, that is not a headline writer's flourish. That is her testimony. The crossing first. A November Atlantic. The ship is one of the great liners, and your suite is the best on it. And none of that matters, because the North Atlantic in November does what it does. The ship climbs and drops. The horizon tilts in the porthole, tilts back, tilts again. The corset, even the loosened travelling corset, becomes an instrument of torture on a moving floor. The busk presses your breastbone every time the bow buries itself. You're seasick and homesick, which are different sicknesses with the same geography, and you spend hours lying rigid in the swaying dark, listening to the deep grind of the engines carrying you away at 400 miles a day. And in the next room is your husband, and the wall between you might as well be the hull. Because here is what you are learning, hour by hour, meal by meal, in the terrible intimacy of a ship. You have married a stranger, and worse than a stranger. A stranger might improve on acquaintance. The Duke on acquaintance is revealing exactly what he is, which is a man performing a duty he resents with a correctness he mistakes for kindness. He is not brutal. Put that fear down. This is not that story. He does not shout. He does not drink. He does not raise his hand. What he does is colder and stranger, and in its way hard to survive. He talks. At meals, in the endless enforced togetherness of travel, he talks, fluently, indifferently, and the subject of nearly all of it is Blenheim. Blenheim's history, Blenheim's precedents, the dukes in order. What is owed to the name? What will be expected of you as its duchess, in a world whose rules you do not know, among people you have never met, in a country you have visited as a tourist and will now serve as an institution? He corrects you. Small things, a form of address, an opinion ventured too freely, an enthusiasm displayed at the wrong pitch. Each correction is delivered mildly, reasonably, and lands like a pin pushed into the same small area of skin, and there are hundreds of them, and they do not stop, ever, for years. And somewhere in those first weeks, she places it herself plainly. He tells you the thing that no bride should ever be told, and that this particular groom apparently thought it honourable, or at least tidy to say out loud. He tells you about her. The girl in England, the one he loves. He gave her up, he explains, to marry you, because Blenheim required it. He is telling you this, one gathers, in a spirit of full disclosure between colleagues. He loved someone. He renounced her. He married your railway shares. Here you both are. Think about where you're sitting when you hear this. You are 18. You gave up Winthrop Rutherford under siege, under a mother's manufactured deathbed, and some part of you had perhaps still hoped, in the way that 18 hopes, that affection might grow in this arrangement the way it was always promised it would, given time, given patience, given goodness. And across the table, dabbing his mouth with a napkin, your husband hands you the accounts fully audited. 2 people at this table, and both of them in love, and neither of them with each other, and both of their loves amputated by the same operation, for the sake of a roof neither of you has slept under yet. She wrote, an old woman remembering that the honeymoon was when she understood the full extent of her mistake, except that it was never her mistake to make. It was made over her head and signed in a vestry. And that she cried in hotel rooms across the winter Mediterranean, in Rome, in Monte Carlo, behind the shutters of the most beautiful rented rooms in Europe, while outside the windows the wedding of the century continued to be celebrated in every newspaper in 2 hemispheres. Picture one of those evenings, because this is where the title of tonight's story lives, and it deserves more than a sentence. Rome, say, December. A hotel suite the size of a chapel, frescoed, gilded, cold in the way southern rooms are cold in winter. A marble-floored cold that comes up through the carpets and finds your feet. Dinner has been eaten downstairs, in public, in performance. The young Duke and his famous bride watched from every table, the 2 of you conducting a conversation in the flat, bright tone of actors who despise the play. Now it is over. He is withdrawn to his own room. Separate rooms. Always. That is simply how his class lives, and for once his class's coldness is a mercy. Jean has unlaced you, hook by hook, bone by bone, and you have felt the day's marks aching back to life along your ribs, and she has brushed out your hair. 50 strokes, 100, the brush crackling faintly in the winter dry air, and asked in her soft French if Madame la Duchesse requires anything else. And Madame la Duchesse has said no, thank you, Jeanne, and the door has clicked and you are alone. And that is when it comes. Every night it waits for exactly this, the click of the latch. It starts in the throat, a swelling pressure like a swallowed stone, and you fight it for a minute or 2 out of pure trained habit, spine straight even now, even here, even with no one to see. Then you stop fighting it. You sit at a stranger's dressing table in a city where you know no one. 3,000 miles of ocean, and a signed contract between you and every person who ever loved you, carelessly and free of charge, and you put your face into your hands and you cry the way you were never once permitted to cry at home, audibly, shoulders moving, the whole instrument, The sounds you make are small in that huge frescoed room. Above you on the ceiling, painted gods recline on painted clouds and pay no attention. Somewhere down the corridor a liftgate clashes, footsteps pass, the ordinary hotel night goes on. You cry until the stone in your throat dissolves, and then you sit in the ringing quiet afterward, breathing in shudders, and you look at the girl in the dressing table mirror, eyes swollen again, always again, and the watcher inside you, the one built out of books in your father's library, makes her nightly entry in the ledger no one can confiscate. Remember this, all of it, exactly. One day it will be evidence. Then you sleep because even grief has a flaw, and the body finds it. And in the morning the corset goes back on, and the face goes back on, and the Duchess of Marlborough appears at breakfast. Radiant they will write, and no one in the dining room watching the most fortunate young woman alive butter a roll she cannot finish will ever suspect a thing. That is what crying through your own honeymoon actually looks like. Not one collapse. A schedule. The honeymoon lasts months because that is how his class does it. A slow, ceremonial progress across the winter. Rome, the galleries, Monte Carlo, the Riviera, Paris in the spring for the fittings, because a duchess cannot arrive at her palace dressed like a mere millionairess. There are jewels to be bought with your own dowry and presented to you as if they were gifts. There are gowns from Worth. There is a tiara. You stand for the fittings the way you have stood for fittings all your life, arms slightly raised, pins travelling around you, a living dress form with a title, and through the window the Paris spring is happening to other people. And then, at last, in the raw green end of March 1896, England, the boat train, the small grey stations flicking past, and Woodstock. I want to slow all the way down here, because your arrival at Blenheim is one of those scenes where history holds its breath, and because it is the hinge of your whole life. Everything before it was the sale, everything after it is the delivery. The town of Woodstock, Oxfordshire, has decided to welcome its new Duchess. This is not a metaphor. The whole town turns out. They have taken the horses out of the traces of your carriage. This is an old custom, reserved for royalty and beloved lords, and teams of men, actual living men in their Sunday clothes, pull the carriage through the streets themselves, through cheering, under arches of flowers and banners of welcome, church bells hammering away overhead, children running alongside, and you sit in the carriage being hauled by human beings like a sacred object, an 18-year-old from New York, and you do the smiling and the bowing that the steel rod prepared your neck for, and you think, she told us she thought it, that all of this joy is for a girl none of them has met, married to a man none of them would envy if they knew. Then the carriage passes through the great arch, and you see it. There is a spot just inside the entrance to the park where the whole composition detonates at once. The lake below you, Vanbrugh's colossal bridge striding across it, the land rising beyond and crowning it, vast and honey-grey and horizontal as a range of hills, the palace, Blenheim. When the future King George III saw this exact view, he is supposed to have said, "We have nothing to equal this." The King of England, mind you, comparing his own palaces and conceding. It was begun in 1705, the nation's thank you to John Churchill, 1st Duke of Marlborough, for the battle in Bavaria that broke Louis XIV's armies. It took 17 years, ruined its architect, and enraged Queen Anne with its cost, and what all that fury and stone bought is the only non-royal palace in England, 7 acres of roof, 187 rooms, a front so wide you cannot take it in without turning your head like a spectator at tennis. It is objectively one of the most magnificent things human beings have ever built, and it is your prison now, and both of these facts are true at once, and learning to hold both at once is going to be your life. The staff is drawn up to receive you. Read that plainly. Drawn up, like troops. Dozens upon dozens of them on the steps and gravel in ranked order. The house steward, the groom of the chambers, the butler, under-butlers, footmen powdered and matched for height, the housekeeper black-silked, with her chatelaine of keys, housemaids, still-room maids, kitchen staff, and beyond them the outdoor army, gamekeepers, foresters, grooms. Something like 200 people work this place indoors and out, and every single one of them is looking at the small, dark-eyed American girl descending from the carriage, and every single one of them knows to the dollar, because the papers printed it, what she cost and what she is for. What she is for. Let's say it, because everyone at Blenheim could have. You are there to fund the roof and to produce the air. Those are the deliverables. Everything else about you is decoration. That first evening sets the pattern for 1,000 evenings after it, so live through it once, carefully. Dinner at Blenheim is served in a room where the table could seat a squadron, but tonight it is just the two of you, husband and wife, seated not together but at a formal distance, with the butler and footman standing at their stations against the walls. The room is cold. Great rooms are always cold. No fire on earth heats 7 yards of ceiling. The plate is gold and the soup goes cool in it, gold being a fast conductor, a fact you learn the way you now learn everything silently by touch. Course follows course with liturgical slowness, and the Duke does not speak. This is the detail she chose, out of all the details of that marriage, to make immortal, and once you hear it you understand why. At his own dinner table, night after night, the 9th Duke of Marlborough would sink into silence, moody, bottomless, punishing silence, sometimes for the length of the entire meal. He would take out whatever was on his mind and turn it over invisibly, pushing his food about, twisting the ring on his finger, and the footmen would stand like painted figures against the walls, trained to see nothing, and the clock would tick, and the candles would fizz faintly, and you would sit erect, the rod, always the rod, at your end of the gleaming emptiness, 18 years old, with nobody to talk to and nothing to do but endure. She began taking a book to the table. Think about the nerve that took in that world under those footmen's eyes. The Duchess of Marlborough, reading a novel at dinner in the state of a palace, because her husband had not addressed a word to her since the soup. She records that she did it, and you can hear, even across the distance of an old woman's careful prose, the small dry satisfaction it still gave her. He built a silence to diminish me, and I furnished it. Knitting the evenings together are the mechanics of your new job, because Duchess is a job, and nobody hands you the manual. They simply watch you fail toward competence. Precedence. At any dinner you must send the guests in to table in exact order of rank, and getting it wrong is not a slip. It is an insult with a surname attached, and the surnames report it. The tenants and the villagers, whose cottages you begin to visit with soup and blankets in the manner expected of a duchess, and who turn out to be the first people in England who are simply glad to see you, no ledger attached. The house itself, which you must learn like a foreign language, which of the 187 rooms are shown to tourists. Yes, tourists, the public tramps through on open days, and you learn to hear them beyond a door, herds of strangers' feet on your floors. which corridors the family uses, which bell rings where, which of the endless painted dukes on the walls is which. At night your bedroom, a great state chamber, is so far from the working heart of the house that the silence has a pressure to it, a held breath quality, broken by the things old palaces say to themselves in the dark. Lead ticking on the roofs as it cools, a shutter shifting, wind finding the same flute note in the same window it has played for 200 years. And in that bed, that first spring, you do the arithmetic that every dollar princess before you has done in beds like it. New York is 3,500 miles away. The contract is signed. The shares are transferred. The roof is being mended over your head with your grandfather's trains at this moment, in the dark, tick by cooling tick. There is no way back. There is only through. Through, it turns out, has seasons, and the seasons at Blenheim teach you things New York never could. That first summer you learn the park. 2,700 acres of it, landscaped in the 1760s by Lancelot Brown. Capability Brown, they called him, because he told every client their grounds had capabilities, who dammed the little river Glyme and drowned the valley to make the Great Lake, so that even the water you walk beside is an aristocrat's opinion made permanent. You walk it because walking is the one thing no one can supervise into meaninglessness. You learn the smell of cut hay coming across the water in June, the specific resistance of gravel underfoot on the long avenue, the way the cedars hold their darkness at noon. There are days that summer when, for an hour at a stretch, beside the lake with the house out of sight behind the trees, you're something close to content, and you note the feeling carefully, like a botanist pressing a specimen, because you do not know when you will see it again. You learn the servants, or rather you learn the strange law of the great house, which is that you live among 200 people and are alone. They are everywhere, and they are forbidden to be anyone. A housemaid meeting you in a corridor turns her face to the wall until you pass. That is the rule, older than anyone can date it, and the first time it happens you stop, confused, thinking the girl is ill, and then you understand, and something in your stomach goes cold and stays cold. You were the girl strapped to the rod. Now you are the reason other girls face the wall. The machine has many positions, and you have simply been promoted within it. You learn the cold. Nobody warns you about English cold, which is not the honest knife of a New York winter, but a damp, patient, marrow-seeking cold that lives in stone and never entirely leaves it, even in August. That first winter, water freezes in the bedroom jugs. You dress for dinner in December in a gown cut to the fashion, shoulders bare, in rooms where you can see your breath by candlelight, and you sit through the Duke's silences with gooseflesh under the diamonds, and you develop, as every mistress of a great house develops, an intimate adversarial relationship with fireplaces. The scrape of the coal shovel, the crack and spit of green wood, the small ceremonies of the fire screen, the 2 feet of habitable warmth in front of the grate, and the Arctic acreage behind you. And you learn the diamonds themselves. This is worth a minute because it is the whole story in one object. Among the jewels acquired with your money is a dog collar of pearls, and court dress requires tiaras, and a tiara, you discover, is not a sparkle, it is a weight. A full diamond tiara pulls at the scalp, finds the nerves at the temples, and by the end of a long court evening gives you a headache that lives exactly where the steel rod's forehead strap used to lie. You could not make this up. The band of pain simply changed its material as you rose in the world. Leather for the girl, diamonds for the duchess, same skin, same ache. At court in London you are presented. You curtsy your trained faultless curtsy, to the old Queen's heir, and society receives you. And here is a twist you did not expect. England likes you. Genuinely. The great political hostesses take you up. The Prince of Wales's set approves of you. You are pretty, quick, exotic, and, this surprises them, actually intelligent, actually informed. The library-built person inside you finally finding rooms where conversation is a sport played seriously. At dinner tables in London, you sit next to cabinet ministers and hold your own, and notice yourself doing it, and file the noticing away. It is the bitterest kind of comedy. You are a social success in your marriage's public rooms and a cipher in its private ones. The whole country is charmed by the Duchess of Marlborough, except the Duke of Marlborough. There is one more person at Blenheim you must meet, because he matters to history and he mattered to you. Your husband's first cousin, a stocky, freckled, red-haired young cavalry officer, a few years older than you, who was born in this very palace, in a small ground-floor room off the Great Hall in 1874, because his mother went into labour early during a party, and who loves the place with none of your husband's grimness and all the appetite in the world. He talks. God, how he talks. Torrents, monologues, empires of talk, and at that frozen dinner table his visits fall like military relief columns. He is kind to you in his self-absorbed galloping way, and you like him, and you will know him for the next 60 years, through everything that is coming to the world, and his name is Winston Churchill. At this point in your story, he is simply the poor relation with the enormous voice. He is also, until you do your duty, the heir presumptive to Blenheim. Which brings us, because everything at Blenheim brings us here, to the duty. You are 19 when your first son is born in the autumn of 1897 back in London, and they name him John after the great first Duke, because of course they do. Even your childbed is heraldry. A year later, almost to the season, the second boy, Ivor. And it is you, this is documented, this phrase enters the English language through your mouth, who sums up with one lethal stroke of wit what your body has just accomplished in the eyes of the system that purchased it. You have produced, you say, an heir and a spare, an heir and a spare. People quote it now without knowing a woman said it about her own babies, or which woman, or what it cost her to see it that clearly. The line is funny, the way a scar is shiny. The succession is secured. The palace has its future duke and its insurance. The second deliverable is delivered. Somewhere in a solicitor's office, in effect, if not on paper, your file is stamped complete. You're 21 years old, and the two purposes for which you were manufactured, roof and air, are both accomplished, and the whole of the rest of your life stretches out in front of you like the avenue at Blenheim, perfectly straight, magnificently maintained, and leading back to the house, except that it doesn't. And this is the part of the story they never put in the fairy tale, or rather it is the part that turns the fairy tale into something better, which is a true story about a person. Because the babies change something, not the marriage. Nothing changes the marriage, which settles into its long polar night, two courteous strangers administering an institution. What changes is you. You hold your sons, you feed them against every aristocratic custom that says hand them to the wet nurse and go down to dinner. You watch them fatten and focus and grab, and the watcher in the sealed room, the note-taker, the girl built out of books, discovers that she is done merely watching. Somewhere between the first boy and the second, without announcement, without permission, the person your mother spent 18 years suppressing quietly finishes assembling herself and stands up. And the first thing she does is look around Blenheim, not at the tapestries, at the people, and start asking the question that will organise the rest of her 99 years on this earth. Who else here is trapped, and what can I actually do about it? The answers are all around her once she starts looking, because a great estate is a small kingdom, and every kingdom has a bottom. In the villages on Blenheim land there are cottages where a labourer's family of 8 lives in 2 rooms, where the walls sweat in winter, and the children's coughs have that particular tearing note you learn to dread, and the Duchess's visits, which for generations meant a basket, a Bible verse and a swift retreat, turn under you into something the cottagers have never seen before. The great lady sits down on the actual chair, in the actual smoke, and asks the actual questions and writes things in a little book. And then, unprecedentedly, things happen. A roof gets mended that is not the palace's roof. A doctor's bill vanishes. An almshouse gets warm blankets that are new, not the great house's discards. There are old women in those almshouses, widows of estate workers, parked in genteel cold to die politely, and you take them on as yours, and you will keep charge of old women like them, in one form or another for the rest of your life. Decades later, in another country, you will still be building homes for them, and it starts here, in these smoky rooms, in your early 20s, with a notebook. The estate notices. England notices slowly. The American Duchess, it turns out, is not playing at charity between fittings. She works at it with a focus that is vaguely alarming, chairing things, inspecting things, remembering the names of children. If anyone had asked you why, nobody asks duchesses why. You could have told them, though you probably wouldn't have, because I know exactly what it is like to live warehoused in a beautiful place at the convenience of people who do not see you. I have been the inventory. I recognise inventory when I meet it. Meanwhile, the marriage does what unheated things do. It does not explode. It simply loses temperature year by year until, in 1906, 11 years after St. Thomas Church, it reaches absolute zero, and you and the Duke separate. Formally, publicly, scandalously. The wedding of the century produces the separation of the decade, and the newspapers that printed your measurements at 17 now print your marital autopsy at 29, and your mother's masterpiece stands revealed to the world as what it always was on the inside. A transaction that ran out of things to transact. You take a house in London, you take your sons as much as the law and the system allow, and then you do something that makes the dowager's teacup stop halfway. You go to work, not metaphorically. The causes you've been feeling your way into at Woodstock become, in London, a profession in everything but salary. Homes and hostels for women, servant girls between places, prisoners' wives, the drowned 10th of the richest city on earth. You sit on committees where you're the only person with a coronet, and you learn to be useful in the unglamorous ways, the minutes, the funds, the follow-through. You stand for public office when women can barely do so, and you win. You speak on platforms. The girl who was never allowed to buy a ribbon runs institutions. And in 1921, at 44, comes the ending your 18-year-old self could not have imagined being allowed. The divorce goes through, and you marry again. A Frenchman this time, Jacques Balsan, an aviator, one of those bright open-air men of the new century, balloons and early aeroplanes and sunlight, and he is in love with you, and wonder of wonders, you are in love with him, and you go to live in France. and the second marriage is everything the first was not, which is to say, it is a marriage. But history has one more courtroom for you, and it is the strangest scene in this whole story, so we will end the story proper there. In 1926, the Catholic Church is asked to examine whether your first marriage was ever valid at all. An annulment, sought so that vows can be set right on all sides, and the tribunal needs evidence of one thing above everything. Was the bride's consent free? Did the 18-year-old at that altar in 1895 say her yes freely? Or was it forced from her? And the star witness for coercion, the person who travels to give sworn testimony that Consuelo Vanderbilt was compelled, overborne, broken to it against her known will, is Alva, your mother. 69 years old now, long since remarried and widowed, long since transformed, and this is its own astonishment, into one of the fiercest fighters for women's suffrage in America, a woman who funded marches and bailed out picketers and thundered from platforms that women must own their own lives. That woman sits before the tribunal and testifies, calmly in detail, to what she did in 1895, that she forced you, that she overrode your objections and your attachment and your will. I forced my daughter to marry the Duke, she says, in words very close to those. I have always had absolute power over my daughter. I have always had absolute power over my daughter. A mother's sworn statement entered into the record of the Church. The tribunal grants the annulment. In the eyes of Rome, the wedding of the century never happened at all. The flowers, the 60 singers, the 4,000 guests, the crying girl behind the tool, cancelled, void, a ceremony performed on a person who was not free. You never hated her. That may be the most remarkable line in your ledger. You saw her whole in the end, the tyrant and the fighter, the woman who broke you into a shape, and the woman who stood up in old age and told the truth about the breaking. And when she was dying in Paris in 1933, it was you who was there. Some accounts of a life balance, most don't. Yours and hers ends in the strange grey country between. And you? You get the long sunlit remainder. Decades in France with Jacques, gardens, grandchildren, the hospitals and children's homes you build and fund and actually run. A war, an escape from occupied France, a return. And in 1953, at 76, the last act of The Girl with the Notebook, you publish your memoirs, The Glitter and the Gold, and you tell it. The rod, the whip, the guarded door, the crying, the silences at dinner, in prose as upright as your spine, and the world that once printed your measurements finally gets your testimony, and it is you, not the newspapers, not your mother, not the Duke, who writes the official record at last. You die in 1964 at 87, and they bury you where you asked to be buried, at Bladon, the little churchyard on the edge of the Blenheim estate, near your younger son. A few feet away lies your old dinner-table relief column, Winston, who chose the same modest ground over the abbeys of the nation. The palace your dowry saved stands a mile off across the park, and it stands today, roof sound, open to the crowds, and every one of the hundreds of thousands of strangers who walk its staterooms each year walks, whether they know it or not, through the converted tears of an 18-year-old from Fifth Avenue. That's the story. Now let it get quieter, because the night is getting on, and this last part is just for you, lying there in the dark. But before the lullaby, drift with me a little, sideways, the way a mind drifts before sleep, because there are corners of this story we pass too quickly, and the small hours are made for corners. drift back first into one ordinary day at Blenheim in the middle years, say 1899, because you have heard the arc of the life now, and the arc is not where a life is actually lived. A life is lived in days, and her days went like this. You wake in the state bedroom to the sound of the housemaid at the grate. That is the alarm clock of the whole ruling class of England. The soft, gritty scrape of a black-lead brush on cast iron, the chink of the coal, the little wooden knock of the housemaid's box set down on the hearthstone. The girl works kneeling, in the dark, as quietly as iron can be worked, because the fiction is that you're not to be woken, and the deeper fiction is that the fire lights itself. By the time your eyes are properly open, she is gone, wiped away like breath off glass, and the flames are talking in the grate, and the room smells of coal smoke and cold linen and faintly of the beeswax and turpentine the floors are fed with. A smell you will carry in the back of your nose to your grave, and that will always, always mean England. The water for washing comes up in copper cans with towels laid over them to hold the heat, carried by hand up 60 stairs, because Blenheim in your day has 7 acres of roof, and effectively no plumbing a modern child would recognise. Your money is fixing many things. It cannot fix the 18th century all at once. The can water steams in the basin. The first handful of it scalds pleasantly against your face, and by the time you have rinsed, the marble of the washstand has already pulled the heat out of everything, because marble is marble in Oxfordshire the same as in Newport, loyal to no one, cold to all. Then Jean and the ritual of assembly. Understand that you will be fully dressed and undressed at minimum 4 times this day. Morning dress, something for the afternoon, a tea gown and full evening dress. And each assembly is a construction project with its own fastenings, its own gloves, its own boots or slippers, hooks and eyes by the dozen, buttons by the score, a button hook working down a kid glove tight as a second skin, button, 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 20 of them to the elbow. You stand for it. You have stood for it all your life. Your arms know the angles the way a soldier's hands know his rifle, and while Jean works you read your letters, because you have learned to reclaim time in slivers, and the slivers add up, and in the slivers you run your charities. Breakfast is English and enormous, and mostly ignored. Then the housekeeper, black silk, chatelaine, the day's business, which rooms for which guests, the menus to approve, a housemaid ill, a leak. There is always a leak somewhere in 7 acres of roof. Your dowry chases it around the building like a cat after a mouse, and you make the decisions. And here is a thing nobody expected, least of all you. You are good at this. The rod and the whip and the governesses were meant to produce an ornament, and they accidentally produced an administrator. The house runs better under you than it has run in 2 generations. Even the Duke knows it. It is one more thing he does not say at dinner. If it is an open day, the public comes. You hear them before you see them, that herd murmur beyond the doors of the private wing, boot soles by the 100 on stone floors, the flat voice of the guide reciting battles and bequests. Sometimes, crossing an upper landing, you look down through a doorway at them, the tourists in the staterooms, craning at the tapestries where your husband's ancestor forever wins his war, and one of them looks up and sees you and grips her neighbour's arm, and you watch yourself become, in real time, the best thing they will tell at supper tonight. We saw her, the American one, the Duchess herself on the stairs. You incline your head, because you're always gracious. It is load-bearing graciousness, and you pass on, and behind you the murmur spikes and settles. In the afternoon, the cottages, or the almshouse, or the school. This is the part of the day where your shoulders come down an inch. In a labourer's kitchen, nobody minds which fork. The tea is strong enough to trot a mouse across. The bread is real. The children stare at you frankly the way only children and animals are allowed to. And an old woman with hands like tree roots tells you about her knees and her son in the army and treats you, wonder of wonders, approximately like a person. You stay too long, always. Walking back up the avenue afterward with the light going amber and the rooks streaming home over the cedars in long, ragged ropes, their creaking racket falling down through the cold air. You have your hour of something like peace, and then the house takes you back and the dressing gong goes, booming down the corridors like a warning to shipping, and it is time to build the Duchess again for dinner. And dinner is the silence. You know about the silence now. The gold plate, the standing footman, the clock. The book you bring in your lap like a smuggled friend. Some nights there are guests and the machine of precedence and conversation runs, and you run it brilliantly, and afterward in the drawing room over the coffee you are funny. People remember you as funny, the wit dry, deployed sparingly, landing hard, and no one but Jean, unlacing you at midnight, hook by hook, bone by bone, the day's red ladder marks aching back to life along your ribs, sees what the performance costs, or hears how quiet you go when it is over. That is a day. There were roughly 4,000 of them between the wedding and the separation. You survived them one at a time, which is the only way days can be survived, and you kept the ledger, and the ledger kept you. Now drift wider. Because you were never alone, though it felt like it. You were one of many, and the many deserve their minute. They called it the Gilded Exchange, and by the time it wound down, something like 100 American heiresses had married into the British peerage in a single generation, and hundreds more into the gentry below it, and the money that travelled with them, dowries, settlements, allowances, ran to sums that helped re-roof, re-drain, and re-endow the aristocracy of an entire nation. There was Jenny Jerome of Brooklyn, who married Lord Randolph Churchill and became the mother of that talkative red-haired cousin. There was Mary Leiter of Chicago, department store money, who married George Curzon and ended as Vicereine of India, the highest position any American woman had ever held on earth, and died at 36, worn through by it. There was Francis Work, whose American blood, threaded down the generations, ends up in the veins of the kings of England themselves. Girl after girl after girl, launched across the Atlantic like beautiful freight, each one photographed and toasted and delivered, and behind every third or fourth toast, if you knew how to listen, a story like yours. A title on the surface, and under it a bargain the bride had negotiated no part of. And the men on the other side of those altars were not villains, mostly, any more than your duke was. They were prisoners of a different wing of the same prison. Sonny Marlborough did not invent the doctrine that the house outranks the human. He was raised inside it exactly as you were raised inside the rod, and it bent him exactly as permanently. He gave up the woman he loved for Blenheim. He spent your dowry on Blenheim. He remarried after you, a brilliant, strange, beautiful woman named Gladys, who had adored him for years, and Blenheim ate that marriage too. She ended sleeping with a revolver in her room, and left him, and he died in 1934, having gotten everything he bargained for at St. Thomas Church. The roof, the air, the gardens remade in glory, Everything except one single year anyone would call happy. If you want the cost of the system totalled honestly, total it on both sides of that aisle, and Winthrop Rutherford, the man on the bicycle. He waited, longer than the newspapers thought he would. He eventually married twice, lived a long, comfortable, sporting gentleman's life, and history, which loves a rhyme, gave his family one, a generation on. It was a Rutherford the young Franklin Roosevelt's forbidden love belonged to. The half-mile of dirt road where a 17-year-old said yes to him stayed what it was. Half a mile in spring that led nowhere, and that she remembered at 90. Drift once more, further back this time, because there is one scene we skipped in the middle of the story, and it belongs to you lying here in the dark, more than any other scene in her life. It is the elevated view. Every one of these stories has one, if you look. The moment the person climbs above their own life and sees it whole. Hers happened on water. It is the summer of 1896, her first at Blenheim, and there is an evening on the lake. The Duke is in London. The house party has dispersed to dress, and the Duchess of Marlborough, 19 years old, does a small, forbidden, ordinary thing. She takes one of the estate boats out alone. No boatman, no footman, no one. She can row. American girlhoods, even gilded ones, included such skills. And the oars are heavier than she remembers, the leathers squeaking in the rowlocks, the blades throwing cold drops across her wrists at the top of each stroke, and the effort is glorious. Actual muscular effort. Her own body doing work she chose, breath deepening past the fourth rib for once because she has come out uncorseted under a summer cloak, a scandal with no witnesses. She pulls out to the middle of Capability Brown's drowned valley and ships the oars and lets the boat swing. And there it is. The whole composition, from the one vantage its builders designed it for and its owners almost never use. The water holding the last of the light like a poured mirror, the bridge lifting its arches, and above the black trees the palace, immense, honey-coloured, going to grey. Its hundreds of windows catching the sunset one by one and letting it go. The rooks are settling. A fish rings the surface somewhere with a sound like a dropped coin. From the middle of the lake, the house is exactly what the guidebooks say it is, one of the supreme sights of Europe, and she sits in the rocking boat and looks at it and holds, at the same time, in the same mind, without flinching, both of the true things, that it is magnificent, and that it is the price of her, that she is looking at the most beautiful receipt ever issued, and floating there, she understands something that will organize everything after. The house will outlast everyone. It outlasted the Queen who raged at its cost, and the architect it ruined, and 8 dukes, and their 8 duchesses, and it will outlast Sunny, and it will outlast her, and it does not know any of their names. You cannot defeat a thing like that, and you cannot be loved by it. You can only decide what you, the brief warm creature rowing on its lake, will do with your handful of decades in its shadow. The house has its purpose. She will have hers, not revenge. Revenge would still be about the house. Use. She will be of use to people the house cannot see, and that will be her answers to the stone, and the stone can stand there for 1,000 years and never know it lost the argument. She rose back in the dusk with her palms stinging, 2 new blisters rising at the base of her fingers, the first blisters of her adult life, and she wrote in effect long after, obscurely proud of them, these small burning coins of honest damage, earned by her own choice, belonging to no one but her. She rows back and the years row on, and since we're drifting anyway, follow the thread of the suns for a moment, because they are the part of the bargain that turned real. The heir, Blandford they call him by his courtesy title, and little Ivor. She raises them as much with her own hands as the system will permit, which is more than any duchess before her, reading to them, keeping them near, fighting the nursery hierarchy in 100 small engagements. When the marriage breaks in 1906, the boys are 9 and 8, and the cruelest clause of her world activates. Children of such a house belong, in law and custom, substantially to it, and she must share them, negotiate for them, hand them back at the ends of holidays to the cold palace and the colder father. She does it. She writes to them constantly, letters full of jokes and drawings. She makes her London houses places boys actually want to be, and she wins, in the end, the only verdict that matters, which is that both her sons, all their lives, loved her plainly and gladly, and Ivor in particular remained close to her until his death. She outlived him, which is the one grief in this story I will not open tonight. It is late, and she carried it, and that is enough said. The point is smaller and warmer. Out of a marriage with no love in it, she manufactured love anyway, downward into the next generation, the way a plant grows toward light it has never been given directly. The rod, the whip, the settlements, none of it got passed on. It stopped in her. Whole dynasties of damage travel parent to child forever until one person absorbs it and does not transmit, and that person almost never gets a monument. Consider this hers. Keep that image of the girl in the boat. We're nearly at the quiet part now. But first, gently, let's fold the whole thing closed, edge to edge, the way Jeanne folded the wedding veil. Because you have lived a strange double life tonight. You've been an heiress with a steel rod along your spine and a strap across your forehead, holding your book up to your held-up head. You've felt a maid's knee in the small of your back and your breath leaving in halls, and the busk cold down your breastbone and the 30 hooks closing up your spine. You've stood behind a locked door on your wedding morning with ice melting into your hairline while a footman's shoes creaked outside. You've made 4,000 people wait 20 minutes and let them invent their reasons. You've walked up an aisle through the smell of murdered lilies on a trembling arm and felt a cool, dry ring settle onto your finger like a small cold fact, and cried behind Toul in front of 2 nations, and been called radiant for it in the morning papers. You have crossed a November ocean with a stranger, and heard him explain over dinner whom he actually loved. You have wept on a schedule in the frescoed rooms of Rome, quietly, shoulders moving, gods on the ceiling paying no attention, and gone down to breakfast rebuilt. You have been pulled through a flowered town by men instead of horses, and stood before an army of 200 servants who all knew your price. You have eaten 1,000 silent dinners off cooling gold, and answered the silence with a smuggled book. You have felt a tiara's ache settle into the exact groove the leather strap wore when you were 8, and understood the joke, and declined to laugh. And you have watched the girl inside the machine come slowly, stubbornly alive. The notebook in the cottages, the almshouse blankets, the committees, the platforms, the second love, the sworn courtroom truth that unwound the lie at the root of it all, the memoirs in her own upright hand, and the small churchyard at Blaydon within sight of the roof she paid for, where she sleeps now among neighbours who called her your grace, and meant by the end something warmer. She was asked once, in her old age in effect, whether it had been worth it. The title, the palace. all that glitter for all that gold. The old woman considered the question the way she considered everything, with that beautiful, terrible posture, and the answer she gave the world was her whole life after 1906. The hostels, the hospitals, the homes for old women, the cause is one. She did not say the system was worth it. She said, in everything she did, I was put through it and I made it pay, which is, if you think about it, the most Vanderbilt possible revenge. Her grandfather turned railroads into money. Her mother turned money into rank. And Consuelo, the quiet one, the one they strapped and laced and sold and shipped, she turned suffering into use. Of the 3 conversions, hers was the hardest, and hers is the one still paying out. There is one more circle to walk before sleep, and it belongs not to her, but to the crowd, to the people on the pavement. 'Cause you and I, listening in the dark 130 years later, be honest, we would have been on the pavement. So stand there for a while in the cold among your own. It is 9:30 on the morning of November the 6th, 1895, and you've been on Fifth Avenue since 7, and you cannot feel your feet. You're a shop girl, say, from a dry goods counter on 6th Avenue, and you've traded shifts and lied a little to be here, and around you is everybody. Seamstresses and clerks and mothers with children riding their hips, messenger boys who've discovered urgent business on this exact block, old men, servants on invented errands, a knife grinder who has given up all pretense of grinding. The cold comes up through your boot soles from the stone. Your breath and 10,000 other breaths hang over the crowd in a faint communal fog. When the mounted police shift their line, the whole mass of you sways together like water in a moved basin, shoulder into shoulder, someone's umbrella ferrule finding your instep, someone's bag pressing your ribs, and nobody minds much because minding would waste attention, and attention is what you came to spend. Boys move through the crush selling things. That is the part they leave out of the fairy tales. The wedding of the century had a souvenir economy, printed portraits of the bride at a penny, sheet music, sensation papers with the trousseau described to the last flounce, and the papers had already told you everything. The $8 million figure that was wrong, and the 2.5 that was right, the pearls, the 5-yard train, the 60 singers. You know this girl the way people will one day know screen stars. You have never heard her voice. You have strong opinions about her happiness, and when the carriage finally comes, the plumes of the horses first, over the heads, then the shine of the panels, then the white blur at the window. The roar starts somewhere to the south and comes up the avenue toward you like weather, and you hear yourself join it, no decision involved, your own voice out of your own cold throat yelling with everyone for a glimpse of white through glass. You get your glimpse, a dark head, a fall of tulle, a pale oval that may have turned your way. 2 seconds, maybe 3. Then the rear panel, the following carriages, the mounted men, the closing crowd. And here is the question to fall asleep on, gently, without needing to answer it. What did you cheer? Not her. You couldn't see her. You cheered the story. The dress, the dollars, the duke, the day off from your own narrow ledger of rent and boots and counter hours. Everybody on that pavement was poorer than the girl in the carriage by margins that do not compute, and every one of them, you included, spent the morning aching for her happiness and assuming it, because the alternative, that all that money and all that beauty could be crying behind the glass, was a thought too cold to stand around in. The crowd needed her rescued into joy. The crowd invented the joy and cheered its own invention. We still do it. We have never once stopped doing it. Only the vehicles change. She knew. That is the last sharp thing I will hand you tonight, and then nothing but soft ones. She rode through that roar knowing exactly what it was made of, 18 years old, and she bowed to it because the rod had taught her neck, and she forgave it eventually because the notebook taught her everything else. In her old age she wrote of the crowds without bitterness. They had not have known, she understood. Almost no one could have known. The whole apparatus, the flowers, the settlements, the sermons, the souvenirs, existed precisely so that no one would know. It took her 58 years and one book to beat the apparatus, and she beat it. You know, you're lying in the dark a century and a quarter later, and that is her victory arriving, right on schedule in your room. So let the avenue empty now. The police lines come apart. The crowd drains away down the side streets talking. The boys sell off the last of the penny portraits at a discount. The trampled flowers along the church railing are swept into a barrow. By 4 o'clock, Fifth Avenue is just a street again. Iron tires and hooves and the darkening cold, and the lamplighters are starting their rounds, and inside a shut and dimming St. Thomas Church, a sexton moves down the aisle snuffing candles, and the smell of the lilies is already turning. The lilies turn, sweet going to heavy going to gone. Everything winds down. That is the mercy built into every enormous day. It ends like the small ones, in dusk and sweeping and lamps. And far out past the Narrows, on a darkening sea, a lighted ship is carrying a girl east into everything you now know is coming. And there is nothing you can do for her from here, and you don't need to do anything for her, because you know how it ends. The boat on the lake, the notebook, the blisters, the book with her name on the spine, the churchyard in sight of the roof. She makes it. She makes it all the way through, 99 years worth of through. You can let the ship go. Let it go. One last small scene, because every long night deserves one gift of pure sweetness before the end, and this story, against all odds, contains one. It is decades on, the 1920s, the south of France, and a woman in her 40s is learning to fly, not as a passenger. Her second husband, Jacques, the aviator, the balloonist, the man who once crossed frontiers on the wind for the joy of it, takes her up and teaches her the air, and there is an afternoon over the blue coast with the world tilted below them, the sea hammered silver, the hills folded like cloth, and Consuelo of the rod, Consuelo of the guarded door, Consuelo who was never once in her first 30 years permitted to go to a shop alone, is a mile above the earth with the man she chose, going wherever they like, held up by nothing but speed and air and competence, and she is laughing. We know she was happy in those years. Everyone who saw the marriage said so, a little wonderingly, as if happiness at that address were a species thought extinct. Her mother crossed to visit and found her daughter brown from the sun, and unmanageable and content. And even Alva, the old general, inspecting this unauthorized joy, could find nothing in it to correct. Hold the two pictures together one last time, because the distance between them is the whole story, and the distance is the medicine. A girl of 8 at a schoolroom table, her skull strapped to a steel rod, holding her book up to her held-up head, arms aching, forbidden to bend. And a woman of 40-something in an open cockpit above the Mediterranean, head thrown back, bending any way she pleases, the horizon hers in every direction. Same spine, same person. Nobody who saw the first picture would have bet a penny on the second. The second happened anyway. That is what stories like hers are for, down here at the sleepy end of the night. Not the dresses, not the dollars. Just that. The second picture happens anyway, oftener than the guarded doors of the world would have you believe. Locks rust, mothers recant, contracts expire, and somewhere past all of it, if you keep the notebook and keep breathing, there is an open cockpit with your name on it, and blue air, and someone kind at the controls beside you. Now the room you are actually in. Your room. Tonight. Notice it for a second, kindly. The way she learned to notice things. The weight of the blanket where it lies across you. Its small, even pressure along your legs. The temperature of the pillowcase against your cheek. Cooler than your skin, warming slowly to it. The oldest transaction there is. The sounds your own building makes settling into the night, whatever they are, wherever you are. A pipe ticking, a floor easing, traffic hushing past like distant surf, a refrigerator's hum starting and stopping somewhere like a sleeper's breath. Every house talks to itself in the dark. Blenheim did it in cooling lead and 200-year-old shutters. Yours does it in its own voice. It is the same conversation. It means the day is over and the walls are holding. And notice this, because it is true, and it is enormous, and nobody ever says it. No one laced you into anything today. No one strapped your head to a rod. No one is posted outside your door. You can turn over right now just to prove it. Go ahead, shift, resettle. Let the mattress take you at a new angle. And the movement is yours, unwatched, unbilled, uncorrected. The whole apparatus of that story, the hooks and bones and settlements and silences, none of it has any jurisdiction in this room. You are lying in more freedom than the richest girl in America possessed on the 6th of November, 1895, and you got it for nothing, and it is all around you like the dark, ordinary and total. That is enough. You are warm enough, safe enough, free enough. The heaviness is coming now, isn't it? You can feel it arriving in the usual places first. The small muscles around the eyes giving up their day-long work, the jaw unclenching by a millimetre you didn't know it was holding, the hands, wherever they are, going loose at the knuckles. Let them. Hands have done enough for one day. Hers were always working, remember, gloved and folded and performing. Yours can just be hands now, empty, open or curled, off duty. Your breathing is slowing on its own. It does this every night without being asked. The breath settling lower and lower, down past the fourth rib where the whalebone used to stop her, down into the deep, easy floor of the lungs. No busk, no laces, all the room in the world. In, and the blanket rises a little. Out, and it settles. In, and out. The engine of you, idling down for the night, 400 million years of practice behind every breath, and not one of those breaths ever needed your supervision. Let the story go now, piece by piece, the way a tide takes things off a beach. Let the crowd go first, draining down the side streets in the dusk. Let the church go dark behind its sexton. Let the ship's lights go over the horizon. Let the palace stand there in its park. It doesn't need you to hold it up. It has stone for that. The lake going black and smooth. The rooks folded into the cedars. One window on the private side glowing late, and then not. Let the Duke go, poor cold Sonny, down his long corridor with his candle and his arithmetic. Let Alva go, fierce even in memory, out into whatever room history keeps for its terrible mothers who told the truth in the end. Let Jean go, last of all the servants, closing the wardrobe on the folded veil, click. And let her go too, the girl. She's old now anyway in this last picture, and it is the right picture to sleep on. A very upright old lady in a garden in the south of France, in the 1950s, sun on gravel, a straw hat, a dog at her feet, a notebook. Still, always, a notebook. On the table beside the coffee going cold, and the swan neck that a steel rod built bending at last freely, of its own accord, over a page. She survived everything in this story. She outlived nearly everyone in it. And the sentence she's writing in that garden is the one you heard tonight, arriving at its destination. You, warm, in the dark, eyes closed, knowing. Some nights history is a warning. Tonight it was a promise. Things that are locked can open. It took her decades. It will not take you decades to fall asleep. The principle is the same. The door is not guarded. It was never going to be guarded forever. Centuries will pass. They are always passing. They are passing now, quietly, at the rate of 1 second per second, right through this room. The avenue where the crowd stood is still there, and other crowds stand on it for other white blurs behind other glass. The church is still there. The palace is still there, and schoolchildren walk its staterooms eating forbidden sweets, and none of the stone remembers her price or your name, and that is fine, because stone was never in charge of remembering. People are, and people remembered her, and now you have, and the chain holds for one more night. But people will still do what you're doing now, still lie down at the end of a long day, still let the body's laces out one by one, still hand the world back its noise and keep only the breathing. That doesn't change. It has never once changed. Under the corsets and the centuries, the tired human animal, wanting rest, deserving it, getting it. So let it come. Let sleep take you the way the lake took the light that summer evening, smoothly, without a seam. Let the sounds fade. Let the story fold itself away, edge to edge, into the dark. Let your thoughts slow and soften and finally stop. You've earned this rest. Not the way she had to earn things through decades against machinery, just the ordinary way. A day carried. That's enough. It was always enough. Take it. The last carriage has gone. The lamps are lit. The house is talking softly to itself, and everything is holding. Sleep now. Good night.